Good afternoon. It's a time of change, isn't it? And for the first time in my life, I'm going to get up and speak to an audience in Paris, and I'm going to speak English. A change, particularly strange to be in Paris and talk about North Africa in English, where, of course, we have such a large Maghrebi community, so much activity, which we've seen at the weekend. I spent yesterday afternoon and evening out on the edge of town with some old Algerian friends, discussing the issues that were underway. And they asked me, they said, well, Jon, what are you going to talk about at the big Coface conference tomorrow? And I said, well, actually, I haven't got a clue. And it's true. You know, I haven't got a PowerPoint here, and if I had made one, would it have been useful? Can anyone remember a political event, I certainly can't, in all the years I've been looking, like the overthrow of Zine El Abidine Ben Ali in Tunisia? From the wildest Trotskyist newspaper, from the most radical Islamist tract given to you outside a mosque, to the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, certainly our groups in London, where I do work with Chatham House, with the Foreign Office North Africa Analysts Group, everyone. WikiLeaks didn't have it. I cannot remember an event which has had such a surprise factor. Now, the question is it going to change the way, well, one of the many questions, is it going to change the way that we all do business? Because it was most interested. I noticed that Yves, when he was talking before, mentioned the word gouvernance problématique, problematic governance, as being an issue that we should still take account of. And there he was obviously discussing Eastern Europe, and clearly it's an issue that has been major in North Africa. But the story in Tunisia would seem to say that we've all been in denial, even when talking about governance all the time, on really how bad it is. And I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes, I don't have long, having some ideas on what happened in Tunisia, because it could be very relevant to what happens all the way across the region, or interestingly, it may not have that greater relevance at all. And what you saw, I think, is a political movement that happened in two phases, quite distinct phases. You had the poor martyrdom of that young student in Sidi Bouzid on the 17th of December, and that was clearly an economic factor, the sort of thing that analysts, both economic risk analysts and political risk analysts, talk about all the time. He was protesting at lack of a job and the inability to be allowed even to sell a bit of fruit in the market. But perhaps the inability to sell a bit of fruit in the market issue tells you more about what happened in the second phase. Because North Africa and other regions have a degree of stability, that stability that we've talked about. They have the stability in the authoritarian structures of the state. The fact is the police can come out and hit you over the head. It's a good disincentive not to go out on the streets. You can get killed. There's also the sort of social compact with populations that you had in Tunisia, by which, yes, there's going to be a degree of liberalisation. Yes, we're going to do what we can to get you jobs. Yes, the ruling elite's going to rob you left, right, and centre. But the fact is that there is a degree of consensus. And what it seems to me has happened in Tunisia is the population came out on the streets in what was, after all, in social and economic terms, arguably the most successful country in the whole region. The Tunisians, with quite a degree of accuracy, can say they're the only country that's actually managed across the whole of North Africa to have a middle class in terms of the social indicators, I'm sure many of you know, in terms of education, in terms of women's rights, people's working, in terms of the number of people working, in terms of investment, the sort of investment that the Tunisians have sucked in to quite a high degree, precisely because they've understood they needed investment to create jobs. They've done they've had a very close and intelligently thought out relationship with the European Union, which rare amongst the countries in that region. So why did, in this country, people go from having groups of people who felt themselves very deprived, as in the case of Sidi Bouzid, people in Kasserine, people in some of the Quartiers Populaires in Tunis, why did people who had jobs, who have something to lose, who are essentially middle class, perhaps not as wealthily middle class as the majority of people in this room, but still middle class, who take their kids to school in the morning, who go shopping, have jobs, why did they suddenly go out on the street? Let's forget for a minute the looting and the guys that went out, but look at those crowds that were there last week, and it was the crowds that sent Ben Ali away. Why did they go? It was anger. Now, people talk a lot in North Africa about anger. I'll talk anyone in Algeria, you see the word hogra, anger at the system, what's going on. Tunisia, not quite the same. We hadn't seen it before. They were angry about the way that the political elite, and particularly the group of people around the president, have been robbing them blind. If you go around Tunis, many of you, I presume, know Tunis. You can go from neighborhood to neighborhood, go over to the port of Rades, for example. You see the New Islamic Bank, owned by Saka al-Matari. You can see the car importers, which have very generous fiscal advantages, also owned by the president's son-in-law. You can go to another quarter, go to Gamart. You can see the bit where the Trabelsi is owned. Everyone knows that. These people are not foolish. They live in their own country. They know. They were angry. In fact, they were so angry that they were able to see off the police. The army was able to come in and actually make sure the situation wasn't very much worse than it was. And all of a sudden, something very strange happened. In that anger, Zine El Abidine Ben Ali, the Securicat par excellence, was shown to be the Wizard of Oz. He disappeared. Remember the film, The Wizard of Oz? Dorothy and the Tin Man and everyone, and they got a heart and they got the straw, and the Wizard of Oz disappeared. Now, the question is, how many more Wizards of Oz are they across the region? Is the question of Ben Ali going to be replicated? And there are reasons to think that possibly they won't. There's the question that people are watching. Some people have started burning themselves in the streets. But in each of the countries, the political system, the actual political culture has changed, is very different. Are the Algerians going to come out on the streets and try and overcome their rather corrupt government, having had the experience, which the Tunisians didn't have, of a decade of civil conflict? Are the Egyptians going to come out on the streets? Certainly their social position is very much worse. The Islamic Brotherhood in Egypt is, of course, a historic party, and there are people of radical views all across the society, and there are a very great amount of people who are angry. Walk around the streets of Cairo, and that can be, these days, quite an angry place in a most otherwise civilized country. But are they going to take on the ranks of security police? Can it happen? And the jury, I think, on these questions is out. But what the Tunisian situation surely shows us, and this is far away from what I was going to talk about today, what it surely shows us, that in these countries where you have unresolved governance issues, where the polity has not been able to mature and diversify, you might be diversifying your economy, but you haven't diversified your politics, that you can't go into denial about that, because all of a sudden one day the crowd is going to face out the president and you don't know where it's going to go. How big is the risk? No, I haven't got very long. Well, I was saying to someone before, we're on a path with there are several paths we can go. I'm actually relatively optimistic, but the problem is, for whichever path we take, there is no map. Tunisia is a country that has always had a view of the constitution. The founding party was the Dastur, constitutional party. Bourguiba's party, the Neo-Dastur, constitution. There are constitutional ways of sorting out the political problem. The problem is the opposition of all sorts is being crushed. People are saying there is no opposition. Well, I'm afraid there is. In those burning prisons, there are large numbers of Islamists and indeed some secular opponents who've been arrested. There are a lot of good people still within the ruling party and within the system. It is possible that Tunisia can show us that North Africa can produce radical political change and still maintain a form of stability. But what is clear is everything is in flux in a region where politics is important. I don't think I have any more time, do I?
I think you do.
I do, okay.
You might have a couple of more
Sorry,
minutes.
okay, sorry, I was reading my watch wrong. I was getting, so, décalage horaire. The politics is very important. And if I come back now, having said a few words on Tunisia, to what I was actually going to talk about, I was asked to talk about the risks in North Africa. Is the region stronger than it was? And what are the risks impacting on investment? Well, clearly, we've just been talking about a major risk because we have absolutely no idea who's going to be in government probably next week. We don't know which way the economic policy is going to go, and quite frankly, we don't know whether there's going to be a civil war. I suspect in the Tunisian political culture, we're actually going to see something rather different from that, and hopefully something more optimistic, but no one knows. But it strikes me that right the way across North Africa, there has been political and economic evolution. You've had a new class of companies coming through, and in some countries, it's been very successful. All the countries of North Africa have seen the need to diversify their economies, to create growth, to create jobs, and to generally put their populations and their elites on a footing close to wealthier countries. They're very aware, painfully aware, of just how far behind they've fallen Asia. The sort of issues we were hearing about just before in the Asian economies remain pretty much inconceivable across the region. But that trend has been very bitty. If you look at the way the countries liberalised and opened up, if we were talking in 2005 or 2006, we'd be saying, actually, North Africa's really started to liberalise well. There is a degree of growth coming. There are goods in the shops. There is some economic diversification. There is some change. People are investing. But that has really proved to be very stop-start. I think there are countries and political systems where people have decided, yes, we need to open up and we need to keep opening up, actually to maintain our own stability and create growth, and actually try and get towards the sort of sustained growth that we were seeing in Tunisia, and actually that you're seeing in countries like Morocco, which have really seen their future in an investment-led pattern, and also in Egypt. And in all those three countries, I think you can see a close relationship that's evolved, perhaps we'll discuss it later, with Europe, both institutional and also at a straight corporate level.
Now I think you're
Now we're finished. I was just going to say, in the other countries where there really are investment problems, where you can have much wider payments problems, and there are still issues of confiscation, nationalisation, and political problems. And there, I'd say Algeria and Libya, where both those countries had been heading towards a much more open economy over the last few years, in a change in the political wind in those countries, they've actually gone back much more to the situation, the status quo ante, of very sort of etatiste, state-dominated, centralised decision-making, and it's been a very painful experience for quite a lot of exporters. So, in fact, I'll finish there, halfway where I was, just to say that, yet again, across the region, politics has been dominant. I wasn't going to talk about politics today, but clearly events are such across the region that all bets are off. I'm certainly glad I haven't got a lot of underwriting going on across the region. But actually, I think we can explore later. There are reasons not quite to head to the air raid shelters yet. Thank you very much.